This is Leighton's D-28. I just installed a K&K system in there. This is the original saddle. These were the values we were faced with. The low E was 4 cents flat. It needed to come forward. So I've marked this. I am doing a cantilevered compensated bridge saddle. I'm not making this up. The A string was 4 cents flat, so we're talking about the 7th fret note and its corresponding octave, all the way across all 6 strings. These are the values we're discussing here. So 4 cents flat, that's how much that needed to come forward. The A, same thing. It was almost right at the leading edge of the existing saddle, so now it's gone beyond the confines of the original slot in the bridge. The D string was 8 cents flat, so I'm bringing it right to the leading edge of this cantilevered compensated blank. The G string was 6 cents flat, and if you look here you can see it's pretty well right at the front. There's the original saddle. I'm moving it just back from the extreme edge, so the D is actually a little bit further forward than the G. The B was 4 cents flat, and it was at the back of the original saddle, so it will probably fall within the confines of the original bridge slot, but we still need this compensated cantilevered saddle to get all 6 strings perfectly in tune. 2 more things I'm doing. I'm taking off that sharp back edge. And I am taking the face, the leading edge, I'm taking it down on the edge of the... Here's where we are at this point. It's very close. This actual intersection of the neck to body junction doesn't budge. So over time, and not necessarily a lot of time, even brand new guitars, you get this sort of high spot. We're going to take care of this area first. And I want to speak specifically about the file I use and exactly how we address these frets and what you need to pay attention to when you pull out a file to work on frets. I send out a half a dozen of these blanks that you can cut to whatever shape, most popular guitars you're working on, Tellys, Strats, Les Pauls, etc. Of course, this guard has been cut out for the dreadnought shape. I want to reiterate again about the length of the file and the width of the file. On the tooling surface of the file, the contact point is like the width of a pencil line. So as soon as you do this in a straight line, you've just flattened out the frets and disrupted the radius. You need to crosshatch. Even though the worst high spot is here, I don't file that down. I still move obliquely, very lightly, like this, to work that down. Been doing this for half a century, so like anybody that's practiced at any form of art, it always looks easy when they do it. And if you pay attention to detail, it is pretty easy. So if you find that the file is tipping, you're doing something wrong. You can see that I've got my index finger and I'm kind of pointing the way. So again, I have to mention this again. I've mentioned it so many times that you need to follow the trajectory of the string path. So the strings actually kind of spread out slightly, right, from side to side. So I'm trying to keep that in mind. As long as I keep this file in line with the string path, I'm good. What you don't want to do is tilt the file off of the trajectory of the string path, because then you're in trouble. You don't want to tilt it this way, you don't want to tilt it that way. You want to keep it nice steady stroke. And you saw me rocking the short straight edge a minute ago. Well, I'm going to check it again and see how we do. So just because it's rocking here, I don't do this on that one spot or you disrupt the radius of the frets. I still move obliquely, keeping that high spot in mind, and cross-hatching, sort of coming back in the opposite direction. Or as one subscriber recently mentioned, an X pattern. It's not really an X pattern. That makes me think of sort of tilting the file, but I guess it's an X pattern if you want to call it that. Call it whatever you want, but just keep in mind that we're moving along the same trajectory as the string path. I remember seeing some of the students show up with a file about this long and an inch wide, double cut, very rough pattern. The wider the file, the more difficulty you're going to have. So when one of my students had mentioned that the file was tipping, I thought, okay, I need to address this. The file should never tip. So I'm taking the time to actually show you this so you understand clearly all of the tools that you've got in your kit. Of course, this is one of the 6 straight edges you get, and how you use those tools. Here's our last little bit. Again, even though the high spot is here, I'm not filing like this. I'm still moving obliquely. The other way. And as you get better and better at doing this work, you'll start to realize that the sound of the file will change when the resistance decreases and you've reached your goal. And I think that's the case here. Let's check that one more time. So now we know this is completely level. Now that we have got the frets level along the string path, now we need to take out that sharpness with the crowning file. If you're using it right, you should never touch the center of the crown. What I'm doing is I'm reducing that squareness on the crown of the fret and coaxing the fret back to center. You can see how square these frets are. A second ago, these frets here, these 4 frets look just like this one. I'll work that down, and again, don't touch the center of the crown. We're just kind of coaxing that so that we end up with a tooling swath at the center of the crown about the size of a thick pencil line. Again, starting at the highest part of the radius and working outward. You can see why we have our fret guards on. I send out 6 of these blanks in your kits. Work that next one. Chase that back to center. Don't touch the center of the crown. Good, that's looking good. And the last fret. Come around the other side. You can see how square all these crowns are. We did not disrupt the natural radius of the fingerboard because we moved obliquely across that radius, maintaining it as we go. I can see why the industry has kind of gone bananas and have spent untold millions of dollars on developing a CNC machine to do this. I was reading on Facebook, one of my newly acquired friends is TJ Thompson, who is obviously the definitive Martin restoration guy, an amazing artist. And one of his customers had mentioned on a post that I guess TJ has one of these CNC machines and he's quite excited about it. One of his customers had mentioned on his post that since TJ got this CNC machine, he thought, I'm going to bring my guitar in and get TJ to pluck it. And then when TJ set it up and went to do the work, the guy mentioned in the post that it didn't need any work. And he had said that I guess TJ had out-plecked the pleck machine. I actually burst out laughing when I read that because I've been the voice in the wilderness on this issue for years. Respect the radius of the fingerboard while the frets are being leveled. On to the next stage. This is now done, so the frets are leveled. We've recrowned. Now we're going to do the last little bit and scrub those crowns back to center and buff and polish, and then we'll get on with the final intonation on that compensated saddle. So the block is covered with that flexible vinyl, and it naturally slurs over those frets and scrubs them back to center. Thus the term scrub block. This is the 400 grit, first pass. Of course, I haven't taken my time to explain this, so I would have been done by now. But so there's our first pass. So you can see that those tooling marks are pretty well gone. That first run of 400 pretty well took care of it. Now I've got the paper stacked on the block. This is our 600. You can tell just by the sound that we're getting much closer. There's our 600. I'm going to do a second pass with 600 before we jump up to the final grit. Now we've got our emery paper. So you can see the progression. When I look at the original frets, first 5 frets, these have even a finer sheen than the original frets. But we're not done yet. So next I take the 4-0 steel wool and just brush along these frets before we use our buffer. Yeah, that's looking good. Very happy with that. And that is the finished fret level, recrown, and polish. Now we can get on with the rest of the job. So this is where we ended up with this compensated cantilevered saddle. All the values are cut in this one. You can see clearly that the B string and the low E are the only 2 strings that really fell within the confines of the original slot in the bridge. Everything else was cantilevered. The A string moved forward, D forward, G forward, and even the high E moved just slightly beyond the footprint of the original slot. So this all sounds fine and well, but there's nothing like checking with the tuner. Let's see how accurate we got it. Approaching the moment of truth now. I just kind of brush the excess wax off there. With a quick wipe. Back to the tuner. Let's see what we got. 7th, octave, 12th, open, and first fret. Same deal all the way across. The acid test is just play the guitar and maybe layer a few chords. So this is the progression I've looped. By the way, that's our final compensated nut. And that is the final compensated cantilevered bridge saddle. So we'll let that loop play. There's nothing quite like overlaying different inversions of the same chord, superimposing them. And that's what I'm going to do right now. So we'll let that play, and I'm going to do different inversions of the same chords, different positions on the neck. And this gives you a really good overall compensation check end to end. So the second set of chords is... So I could layer that over top of the first set of chords, but there's some other things I want to sort of experiment with. So I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to let that initial group of chords play, and I will blow over it.